It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday. And Delilah was here. You didn't see her leave because of the Feedback Friday slate. But yeah, I don't know what's with my cat. She's like, all of a sudden, no, I don't want to be a part of it. Anyway, you might notice I have a Band-Aid on my face, or a plaster. For those of you that didn't see the tweets or didn't watch Twitch, where I played Disco Elysium, which is super freaking fun. I had no idea what the game was about, and people were just like, play it, I'm gonna buy it for you. It's like, okay. And it's fun. It's freaking fun. It's a very inventive game. Yeah, I cracked my chin open on a kitchen island right off the butcher's block top. I'll spare you the gory details, but yeah, one of the first things I thought of when I realized I was bleeding this badly, and it was one of those things where I didn't realize I was cut. I just got an ice pack and pressed it there. I'm like, it really hurts. Didn't think anything of it. And then I noticed there was blood, like quite a bit of blood on my hand. So I'm like, oh crap, must have scratched my knuckles. And so I went and cleaned it off. It's like, there's no cut here. That's weird. And then my chin was itchy. So of course it hurt, but I hurt myself all the time. And I rubbed my chin. It's like, uh-oh. And then I went and it was kind of a gore fest. And then I went and checked the ice pack that I'd put back in the freezer, and it was all covered in blood, and I just started laughing, but the first thing I thought of is, oh no, what about boss fight? What about boss fight? I'm gonna let this damn thing heal, at least until it's covered up with makeup. I cannot cover it up with makeup until it stops bleeding, but yes, I will keep you posted. I am going to be smart about this for a change, but that's not what I'm talking about this week. I'm talking about your feedback, and there's a lot of comments I think are worthy of reading. I'm just going to start and see where it goes, because I want to get to as many comments as I possibly can. That's the thing about doing those wellness videos, is not as many views, high quality comments. I'm actually thinking about starting a podcast for Wellness Wednesdays instead of the YouTube videos, just because I don't think YouTube, with its algorithm shittiness, is the right place for that kind of content. I'm going to start with the Ubisoft Star Wars feedback. And one person mentioned it's Ubisoft Massive, which makes the Division and the Division 2. So it's going to be a looter shooter. I'm not sure why Disney would go for anything that's sort of a MMO shooter. It's too much like Battlefronts in like the basic mechanics of how it plays. I suspect it's going to be something a little bit more distinct. I could be totally wrong. It could just be a Division style looter shooter, which I don't know. I mean, the backstory to the Division is quite cool. I don't tend to play games like that. I did give the Division a try. I just, anxiety levels in the extractions points, couldn't deal. Not my kind of excitement. Disco Elysium is my speed. But, I mean, it's a well-made game for what it is. None of those. I won't play it if they have those. Too much stress, too much distrust of other people. One person asked about the third person mode in Skyrim, and they went all, angry gamer on me. And how do you not know it's I tried third person mode in Skyrim. It's a craptastic experience, and the character animation wasn't even very good for the time. So yes, it's there, but it's not a good experience. The combat's clearly optimized for first person. I couldn't hit shit when I was playing in third person. So I tried it, but it didn't work. Which brings me to the next thing. Nathan, sorry, this is from paper. I copy pasted everything else, so I'll get the names for other comments. But Nathan mentioned lightsaber customization. And I thought, What a cool idea for like a first person character that the primary mode of your customization is your lightsaber. That would be an interesting new idea in first person mode. Someone else brought up the Old Republic, and I looked into it because I'm like, man, is that game still going? It's really not kind of a cultural void. It is still going, but it's in that point where you don't need like your whole A team for that. And obviously, like BioWare's people have moved on to Anthem and a bunch of other games. So, I mean, I assume BioWare is hopefully working on Dragon Age 4 right now. But yeah, I don't think the Old Republic is enough reason not to make a single player RPG in Star Wars. I think what other people said is more the case, that they've just lost too much talent that could actually do that justice. I'll leave that there, but that's what I think. Moving on to the wellness stuff. I don't know if this is Akine or Akine, but Akine says, in the subject of control, I found that living a healthy lifestyle, or sometimes an unhealthy one, can help get that sense of control back. I can't control what's going on in DC right now, but I can't control what goes into my mouth. There might be something awful that happens tomorrow, but right now in this moment, I can choose to eat an apple instead of a candy bar, and that matters. On the flip side, there might be some kind of violence somewhere, but I can choose to eat a piece of chocolate right now and no one can stop me. That's in my control. It doesn't seem like the two things are at all connected, but knowing that you're in charge of what happens to your own body can go a long way to calming other seemingly unrelated types of anxiety. You just need to be careful that that doesn't turn into micromanaging food and exercise and stuff. And Akine, I'm glad you put in the last bit, because that would have been my caveat had you not added it. That caveat aside, I kind of like that. I like that you can control what you can control attitude. And if all you can control is what you eat, so be it. It's in control, right? It's regaining it. So cool. Joshua said, what I can't stand is those who use their mental disorders as an excuse to treat others like shit. And I included this. It's a short comment. It's just a statement, but I know Joshua's not alone in that. And this is a tricky one because there's people who are just in the depths of it and aren't like being deliberately manipulative. And then there's other people who manipulation, air quotes, is a symptom of the condition. But then there are other people who just use their mental illness as an excuse to not grow the fuck up. And the question is, how do you tell from the outside? The truth is, you really can't. What you can do is choose that you are not willing to accept this behavior from the individual anymore. And that is your right. You don't have to keep eating shit from someone because they're mentally ill. If someone is, if someone is asymptomatic for a really long period of time and brings more positives into your life than the negatives. And I know a lot of people like that, who they'll be great. They'll miss their meds or something will happen. They'll fall off the wagon for a bit. They'll get back on. That's one thing. If someone is constantly, you can't be mad at me because I'm mentally ill, you are not required to wallow in the shit with them. I know that sounds harsh, but that's something I had to learn with boundary setting. You cannot save somebody who does not want to be saved. If anybody's ever done any sort of like water life saving, you know that if somebody's panicking too much, they can like punch you in the face, like I did to myself, or pull you down with them. If somebody's flailing that much, you're not required to sync with them. And unfortunately and frustratingly, there are too many people out there who use mental illness as an excuse to not be a grown up. And again, you don't have to put up with that shit. In the same vein, Vanicus Prime did a little dialogue, and I'm like, shit, I think there's going to be a lot of nodding when I realize this. Someone else. I don't understand what you're afraid of. Me. Fear and anxiety are two different things. Someone else. How so? Me. Fear is thinking something bad might happen. Anxiety is being unsure where you stand. Someone else. So what are you afraid of? Me. Go away. I thought that was a really interesting. First of all, it's funny, and I think a lot of people are like, yeah, that's somebody who doesn't know how to listen. But I thought that was an interesting distinction, that fear is thinking something bad might happen. Anxiety is just being unsure of where you stand. That's an interesting distinction. And yeah, I think there might be a lot of truth in that. I mean, I don't have an anxiety condition. I've never had an anxiety condition. I'm aware of anxiety only through the PTSD. I guess that's close enough. But that's an interesting distinction. Also, yes, there is a shining example of when you are well within your rights. If somebody is just not friggin' listening, you don't have to humor them. You can tell them to go away. So, Noah, shifting to something more positive, it is crazy to me how applicable my experiences with fighting games are to other parts of my life. The only way to stay sane and grow in them is to focus on those tiny victories. Every time you did something better, it is victory enough. That's interesting, Noah, because I got to be in the mood for that. I got to be in the mood for that, like Dark Souls games where they just punish you. And it's true that, especially if you're doing like competitive stuff, you do have to be prepared to lose a lot to get a little bit better. And one of my kind of interesting kind of cottage industry armchair fascinations is how to balance out that fighting game experience of that is part of the process. You know, you learn by playing against other people, and a computer AI is never going to be a substitute for that. And at the same time, most people are going to get too frustrated and, you know, just walk away because they can't do anything. And that's an interesting design. There are some fighting games that are better designed than others for letting people get a few moves in before they get slaughtered. Some of the games are just so heavily driven by combos that you don't have enough opportunity to learn anything, because it's just like boom, 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 like you're just dead if you get a player that's really, really good. I don't have an answer to that design problem. Maybe somebody smarty pants out here does. Fighting games are the one type of game, more and more because of my hands, I will watch. I will be like an esports viewer as opposed to playing. I just do not have the manual constitution or the manual dexterity anymore to be as good at those games as I used to be. And the memory of being so much better is just painful to me. Moving on, Pounce Pounce. I love that screen name. This caught me off guard, and it's like, you know what? I think you're right. Pounce Pounce says, it is strange that it's very cultural. Most of the countries I was living in had not had the punctuality bug, and alone that keeps most people from flipping. That's very interesting. And I realized, yes, one of the most stress-inducing things for me is getting somewhere on time. Partially because I feel awful, partially because I used to work with this complete, I'll take a point of privilege, this complete asshole that was an asshole when anybody was, you know, more than like 2 minutes late. And he'd go on this lecture about how it's disrespecting other people when you're late. And it's like, gee, easy for you to say, you know, buddy with a union film gig. And being on time in film, I'm not gonna, it is important, especially if you're crew, for 5 minutes, like, come on. And I do think that there are some professions where that's super important because people are relying on you and somebody else can't leave until you get there. But there are others where, let's face it, it's a punctuality thing for the sake of it being a punctuality thing. It's like, as we would say on the Broken Clock podcast, it's confusing a corollary and a first principle. Certain jobs, you'll get better employees if people, if somebody is not super punctual, don't schedule meetings for like first thing in the morning because you're all going to be waiting around for that person. Because if the other skills somebody has are so much better that like they just make up for their lack of punctuality. I mean, it could be something as simple as, in my situation years ago, I couldn't afford to live nearby. And so I was at the mercy of traffic and the glorious transit system. And especially in winter, you leave 15 minutes early. It's a 30-minute delay. So you leave 30 minutes early and then it becomes a 45-minute delay. And I do think that some jobs that it's not essential, yeah, I think that people should be a little more chill about grace periods in terms of that stuff. As long as somebody's, letting you know they're late so people aren't standing around, doing nothing, wondering if they're going to show up. But I do think probably it would ease the anxiety for some people if they knew they weren't, going to get a verbal tongue lashing because they're 20 minutes late. It's just not a skill some people have. Now, I mean, for some people, a lack of punctuality drives people nuts, and that's a management challenge, but it's achievable through structures. So I appreciated that. Dodgy Malaka said, I'm already in fight or flight mode for 75% of my day. I think a lot of people are there right now, especially people in essential services and healthcare. And that's hard, man. Like, your body's not designed to be in fight or flight mode 75% of the day. So I really sympathize. I'm not going to give anybody platitudes and say, you got to cut that shit out, because you can't, right? That's the world we live in right now. It sucks. Maybe just acknowledging that it sucks and, recognizing it's like I don't know the circumstances behind this. Whether it's environmental, circumstantial, or whether there's something that can be addressed. So, all I can give is empathy. Sean says, one affirmative statement that has helped once I found it to be actually true is, I am not alone. And that's what I mean about, for me, it's, you'll get through it. For someone else, you are not alone works. You got to sort of try different things on and see which one calms that screaming in her voice, right? Chris said, here in California, we have weed for anxiety. Works good. Again, I'm going to caution against substances for anxiety. First of all, weed can have a rebound effect if you smoke too much. Paranoia is a thing. For some people, it is a better alternative that is easier on your body than pharmaceutical anti-anxiety medications. So, cool. That's one. It's not an option for some people because, if you're wrecked all day, if you're stoned, there are just certain things you can't do. But also, again, like anything medicinal, it's only stabilizing you so you can work on those root issues. And any medication comes with the risk that it will lose effectiveness over time. In the case of a friend of mine, it just stopped working completely all of a sudden after decades. And, he didn't realize what was going on, and things started spiraling for a while. And then, they figured out what it was, but it was awful. And so I will just caution that medication alone you're not going to get the best results. a combination of medication and working on those core issues is ideal. Because, medication, like I said, may stop working. Getting those life skills, those are lifelong, and those are going to help you. Those never stop working. You only get better with that stuff. DX1403 said, I'll start off this week with a fun question brainstorming exercise of sorts. If you were to design the competitor to Twitter or Facebook, how will it work? For this scenario, assume that the government recently passed an antitrust act preventing your site from being nuked off the internet. Oh my God, I could do a whole video on this. DX put his own thoughts that you can read in the comments, but I'm gonna, because he said it's a brainstorming exercise fun question, I'll give my short version. One, it's got to be a clean layout. I can't stand opening up Facebook and all this shit competing for your attention, and Twitter's gotten just as bad. I get that the feed keeps people engaged and all that stuff, but I hate cluttered interfaces. But the other is there is no substitute for human intervention when it comes to rules. A computer loses context. An algorithm cannot determine nuance. And so before anyone is suspended or banned, their communications, their posts must be reviewed by a real person, and they have to be told specifically what they've done wrong so they can learn. That is the big problem with Twitter. That is the problem with Facebook. Uneven opaque rule enforcement. People know they did shit. They don't know what they did. It's guessing. It's just your tweet violated the Twitter rules. Yeah, how? Like, it's ridiculous. So that's my very brief answer. This one, I just wanted to respond. Fevier, I think. I just wanted to again, empathize with this. I lost my mother in October last year. If you've ever lost a parent, you know how you always think you're ready, but you're not actually ready. It was tough. It still is. Despite surrounding myself with wonderful people, I still feel extremely lonely, but I keep going. I still have old hobbies, and I got a couple of new ones. I'm trying my best to eat healthy. I still can't force myself to clean both our rooms, but I'm getting there. Something that felt like a world-ending event in the end was just an event. Fabia, I will let you know that October last year, like October 2020, that's still fresh, man. It takes time. It takes time when you lose somebody close to you. And it is healthy to take that time. I know. I didn't do it. But then again, you might not need the time right away. You may need the time later on. Grief is not linear. It doesn't hit everybody in the same way. But yeah, I mean, I know some people who needed like multiple years to get over something like that, or heal, sort of move on, adjust to the new normal is more what it is. Sometimes it does take longer. The longer it takes, the more concerned you get about, PTS. But yeah, you're talking a matter of months. It's still gonna hurt. It's still gonna be hard. And that's normal. And in many ways, that's healthy. It's better to let yourself feel than to try to deny it's happening. That's what I'll say. Legeos Greymoon, a regular Twitch viewer, said, I'm not sure I'm a fan of the term Survivors Club, only because I really, really am sick of these journos and grifters who whine how they survived Gamergate or were a victim of Gamergate, but I do see what you're saying. I just wonder if there's not a better term, maybe a band of brotherhood or something. Sorry, I know I'm nitpicking. It's kind of how I am right now mentally more than usual, but this is an awesome idea. I read this because when I read the comment, I'm like, yeah, okay, I see that point, that there's a charge with Survivor. So if anybody has a better idea, the problem is anything with a meaning has already been co-opted by some things. So I'm an abstract thinker. I don't care what it's called. The problem with brotherhood is, are we going to make brother a gender neutral term? But yeah, I'm open to alternate terms. I see the point. And sometimes that's enough to say. Unimpressed Turtle says, one way I've helped myself to overcome negativity is by putting a small amount of work into a project each day. As a recent college graduate and a 23-year-old, I often feel unprepared for life. I spent the past year struggling to find a job, go to the gym, or even talk to my friends online. Even now, putting normal pants on in the morning instead of just defaulting to my pajamas feels like an accomplishment. However, since the start of the new year, I've started working on small projects to feel like I'm actually making progress. Every day, I try to add one little thing to a game, song, story, 3D model, video, etc. No matter how small it is, I take pride in what I was able to do despite all the negative feelings I have about myself. The comment goes on, but you get the point. That's something I find very effective as well. I have an autoimmune condition, so some days I just feel like I've been hit by a truck. But I make sure I do something that day. On good days, it doesn't lead to injury. But even if it's the smallest little bit, I did something. I didn't do nothing. And so, yeah, those little things, those little victories, it's amazing. As Unimpressed Turtle said, I love the screen name, how much that can kind of build your sense of ability to accomplish things. As they say, even small achievements are better than none at all. It's true. Isaac21 says, I've had a few nasty breakups in the past, used to be very caught up about it. What helped me move on was reframing the memories and focusing on positive shit that came out of the wreckage instead of the negative. Well done. I agree. Oron Darklord had maybe the most spectacular triumph over adversity story. I sat here and went, whoa, that's like a movie. It's like an 80s movie, man. Long story short, feel free to read the whole comment. But from my high school days, our principal was nuts. Like, there's probably something actually clinically wrong with her. She was the kind of person so pompous that even though it was a normal public school, she called herself headmistress instead of just principal. Authoritarian control freak who ran the school like a third world dictatorship, and I was one of the kids who somehow got on her radar as a dissident of some kind. She made my years there, and those of many others, miserable. Many of my political views today were formed from the microcosm of petty tyranny I experienced back then. Long story short, he went on in great detail, but long story short, he used a dictaphone to tape her, like did a sting, admitting to her doing something that was against the rules, and went to the cops. She got 6 months house arrest for misappropriation of public funds and, of course, fired. And even though it came close to the end of my senior year, I was a hero to my classmates for taking down the evil overlord. After 4 years of a rocky time in high school for various reasons, some of which my own fault and others of which were not, I got to close the book on that chapter of my life on a high note and move on to my college years from a good place socially and mentally, and that set me on the right track to a good life. What a freaking story! Like, what a freaking story. Wow. Yeah, I'm just going to move on. I'm skipping some comments that I otherwise would have talked about for time. I want to close with Jessica Wilson, because Jess has commented multiple times about how she went to a residential school. And I'm running out of time here. I'd explain, like, do a level set for people who don't know what residential schools are, but all I can say is yikes. And she said, video games really helped me heal after a horrible experience at a residential school. It was then that it became more than a hobby. I became invested and generally cared about the industry. I was midway through an education major at my local community college when one of our classes posed a question. What would you do if you weren't a teacher? I answered game design and explained all the reasons why I couldn't. Soon after, I realized the only barrier that kept me from being in game design was myself. So I finished my community college with an associate's in liberal arts, so my credits were extremely transferable. It took about a year after that to find an affordable state college that offers game design. So there's more to the comment as well, but that's really cool. I really give people credit for pulling up stakes on your life path at a given point because you realize it's not right. That was a skill I had to learn later than a lot of people because my family wasn't terribly supportive in that regard. My family is very much you get on tracks and you stay on those tracks because it's irresponsible not to, right? But that takes some guts. It's funny because I was going to go into education and I had a moment of, what am I doing? For me, it was because I recognized that the local schools were just churning out too many teachers, and there were more teachers than jobs. And because it's a heavily unionized profession, it's very hard to get your foot in the door. And, I got the opportunity in media and I took it. And I mean, it's one of the scariest things I ever did, right? Because it's that you're on the road. It's like, and then you turn off and you go off-roading, right? And it's bumpy for a while. And oh God, my mother for decades just mourned the fact that I didn't do the traditional thing that you're supposed to do. But it was the right decision for me, right? Hey, maybe I could have been happy that way, or maybe I would have just continued to replicate patterns. But I just think it's cool that someone realized that was their passion and they're taking the shot, right? We need more of that. We need more people coming into this industry with that sense of optimism and that true sense of loving video games, recognizing the power that they have instead of this sense of bitter entitlement. And I think that's a good place to stop. That's a good way to end for the weekend. There were a lot more comments I wanted to get to, but ran out of time. If you like this sort of content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LanaK. Because this wellness stuff doesn't do great traffic-wise, but people really respond well to it. Have a great weekend.